Hello guys, David Vose here. I'm back. Well, I did an update and got that loaded just before this one. So there'll be two videos today. The first one was just kind of an update and letting you know that I'm back. I show you around, on the property and so forth. But I hope you're having a wonderful day. I've had a difficult week. I explained all that in the video I did before this one if you want any more updates on that. But, well, I got monetization, so we'll see how that works. Looks like they turned that back on. But, guys, I haven't really had a lot of time to think the way I normally do, and I've had my mind on some other things, and I'm trying to get this truck and everything going, and the phone has just been a mess. This is a new phone I've got. I'm trying to get my old phone back in a few days, and I can get into town and get the parts in. But it's just little things that I see. And I want you guys to know that when I say this, I'm not trying to disparage anybody's beliefs. I guess I'm not. I don't even know where, In other words, you're not stupid if you don't think the way that everyone else thinks, or if you have a new idea and you've been watching some videos and there's somebody out there saying this or that. And there's some pretty strange things going around. And so if I were to just say that we shouldn't be conspiracists and follow after every new conspiracy that comes around and just be gullible and believe all this stuff, and we shouldn't believe in this and we shouldn't believe in that, I would sort of distance myself from a lot of my subscribers. And besides that, my channel might have more conspiracy theories than just about any other channel. I mean, we hit the Tartarian thing hard. The millennial reign of Christ. I mean, look, I've come up with some things that it's a shame haven't went viral yet. When I first started, I had a few ideas that went viral, and those things have kind of got everybody talking and thinking about different things. But since that time, I've been banned and taken off and demonetized several times, and here I am again. Now I guess I'm going to get monetized, but it might not make much difference because I'll never get any numbers, because it's difficult to get any viral video going. Without a viral video, you don't get any algorithms so that YouTube will know that people like you, and then, but it's more than that. They know kind of who they want to promote and stuff. So we'll see if they might have opened up the possibility for me to do something, or if they're going to keep my little dial down on low. But I think there just hasn't been that many people watching in the last few weeks and months, so that people are aware, a lot of people are aware of some of the things that we've been talking about, with the fact that angels were never created and that they literally are us. We're the ones that go through this classroom, get our white robes and crowns. And the whole plan of salvation that I outlined in the last couple of videos was just really, really, really intriguing, I think, for anyone who wants to look at that. So if I'm going into these, what people might call conspiracy theories, why should I berate others who are taken off into some other conspiracy theory here or there that I don't happen to agree with? And why is it that I don't agree with all these theories? Well, the answer is because we've got to be careful. And this is what I'm trying to tell everyone. Along with, hey, I found some information that you need to look at, which may sound conspiratorial. However, if it's true, if it's truth, then we should look at it and we should get to know it and understand it and put it together. But I'm just saying, let's be careful, because what we're out to do is find the absolute truth. That's for sure. Truths they've been hiding from us for a reason, probably. Without these foundational points that we've had taken from us, certain awareness of where we're even at. Think about the Bible with all of these concepts that is woven through the Bible. We assume, right? There's some beliefs in there. There's some teachings. There's some ideas. Seems pretty uniform. But it's so vague. For the last 2,000 years, all we've heard is that there was the fall of Adam and Eve. We're in this world on probation. There's going to be a judgment, and then we'll all go to heaven. Okay, but there's so much more. And where does reincarnation fit into this? Most Christians have no idea. And those who aren't Christians might not have any idea how amazing the Bible is. They wouldn't know that it teaches all the truth, just like all the other ancient scriptures teach all the truth. And all of this truth originally came from Enoch and certain biblical characters that in other nations they may call different things, like Thoth or Hermes or Aphrodite or Isis or something. Those are the names that the nations give to people in our Bible. Osiris. There's an empty tomb in the Great Pyramid. Interesting. On this channel, we've talked all about all of these amazing subjects. Heliopolis is another one that's a very important study. But as we've said, because a lot of the plain and precious things that are in the scriptures were taken away, taken out, we're left with 66 books. I believe that's a hint that this is not complete. And so therefore we read in Genesis 6:4, and there were Nephilim in the earth in those days, and they took wives, all that they chose, and they had relations, and these were the giants or something, and it goes on in this little one paragraph. But it's vague and has sparked all this controversy, and nobody knows what it means. I know for years, Christian scholars used to say, one would say, I don't believe it's the Nephilim angels, I think it's humans, and others would say, no, I think angels literally came to earth, and some of, well, how did they come to earth if they were angels? And so nobody knows that angels are humans before they become mortal. And they don't know that, and so they don't know the plan of salvation that is clearly taught in the Bible if you have all the books. But now, even if we had all the books, most of you wouldn't read them all because there's a lot of them, and it would be a lot of reading. But if we did have all the books, and we all believed in all the books, at least the scholars would know this information, and it would be out there. And you'd be taught something closer to what the truth is if you went to church and on Sunday school. But a lot of these Christian scholars are just like, well, we don't know what this Nephilim thing is, or any other number of subjects. It's funny that none of the scholars seem to be able to figure out that the word eternal torture or torment in the New Testament and everywhere, like in the book of Enoch and different apocryphal writings, it does not mean eternal by any means. Absolutely does not. Why don't they know this? It must be on purpose that they have obscured this word. They want to frighten you. So the word isn't eternal, it's aeon, and that word means an age. And they translated age in other places. An age is a specific period of time. Now, also, they didn't know that these ages were known by all nations. They had different words in different languages, but the same word. I mean, in India, they call them yugas, and then they came to be spelled through this transfer into our language. It became ages, yugas, aja. And in the Greek, it's written aeon, but we know beyond a doubt that aeon is the same as the word ages or yugas. And there were various specific, determined, appointed ages. The Bible also talks about them, and with another word, a word that we sometimes translate appointed times, or, appointed festivals or occasions that are on the calendar. And so there's a lot of stuff that we're completely unaware of, and therefore all of this information that's come down to us has got a lot of holes and missing pieces. But it's absolutely amazing that absolutely no one, until recently, has ever even thought about some of these ideas. We've also talked about how they're lying to us about the stars. I'm going to give you one antidote, and we're going to move on from there because we talk about this all the time. But I just want to make this point clear, that there's so much confusion, and it's when you know the truth, it's very clear. Here's one thing you can know about the stars. There's a lot of things we can't know, and this is what we're going to get into about people saying, well, I believe in the flat earth, or I believe in Mandela effect, or I believe in chemtrails or something. And we have to be absolutely clear about these things. If we don't know something, it would be just as wrong to say, well, the earth isn't round or spherical, so therefore it must be flat. We must come to terms with the fact that the Bible may know what shape the earth is, ancient scripture may know, but we're going to have to understand the Bible to get that information. That might be a lot bigger obstacle than you might imagine, because of the fact, like I said, that it's all missing and pieces are, indoctrination, brainwashing, just things that we don't know about ancient cultures that we ought to know, that we were never told. We didn't know that reincarnation was in the Bible, all kinds of things. But this doesn't mean that since we can get up on a mountain and look 40 miles in the distance, like I've done, and see things that we shouldn't be able to see, and therefore we say, well, and by the way, water always comes to level, so ocean must be level, and therefore the earth must be flat. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. It may indicate that something's up and we need to investigate. But what we got to do is start with basic truth, foundational truth. We can't do what NASA's doing and make up stuff. If they're lying to us, we can say, look, I think they're lying. I see something wrong here. If that's all you got, that's all you can say. However, if you do some investigation and you find something that you can prove, then you can state that as perhaps a proof. Run it by other people if you think it's a proof. And if you can verify that that's something that has proof, then you can believe that, and you can use that as a hint to investigate some other aspect. And maybe maybe you'll find some way to figure out exactly the shape of the earth. You could imagine it's probably not a triangle. But it doesn't matter. We're not stuck on whether it's exactly spherical or whether it's egg-like or square or it's a top-looking thing. I mean, the point is, and this is the real imperative thing here. If there is a blob of thing we call the earth that you can say is a composite thing, and we're on the outside of this thing, whatever the shape of it is there an infinite vacuum of space around it? And in the vacuum of space around it are all these millions and trillions of stars. That we can prove is false. Now, that doesn't prove that the Earth is flat, a disc, a triangle, a globe, or anything else. And just standing and seeing the sun come up doesn't necessarily prove anything. It's not proof. There's a lot of things we cannot prove. One thing we can prove is that we're in some kind of a hologram. We can also show, I think we can show that we're in some kind of an enclosed system. And here's why we know this. If you look at the stars and you look at the sun and you look at the moon, and then you look at the earth and the sky and the mountains, all of these things you can see. Therefore, we know we're in an enclosed system because that's all we see. And enclosed means that from me, where I am, from my point of view, to whatever object I'm looking at, I can see the moon, the sun, the stars, the trees, the mountains. If I see a mountain, I know that that mountain is in the same system as me. And that I could get to the mountain because I can see it. Yes, it may be further than the way I could hear it. If I hear something, it's probably a lot closer. If I see it, it's further away, but it is still close enough to where it is within my objective reality. Because we can see the stars, we know that they are in this system that we call our little universe. And in our universe, there cannot be an infinite vacuum of nothing between me and something else. Because the very definition of nothing or vacuum means nothing. Take a bag, get a vacuum cleaner, put the hose at the opening of the and put the bag around the opening of the hose and start sucking, and you'll suck all the air out of the bag. And what happens? That vacuum creates a vacuum. Now, scientists have coined the phrase vacuum of space. That is impossible. It is a contradiction in terms. Vacuum means you've pulled everything out. There's nothing in the bag. It is absolutely void. We know even scripturally the Bible says that there is a void and an emptiness before the creation. Creation is something that exists, material existence, whether it's self, mind, thoughts, those are things or concepts that are real, that we can prove that are real. And we can prove that mind doesn't have any material shape. So we can go into a lot of these things we could prove. But we cannot say that stars are 100 light years away or 50 light years away or 25 light years away or 1,000 light years away. We cannot say that there is a big, vast galaxy 2,000 light years across. That is lies, not speculation. It is lies. Because a vacuum is emptiness, a void that has nothing in it. And therefore, there's no space without something. You can have air that fills a balloon or widens the balloon and then there's something between the surrounding balloon. The interior has something in it, air. Maybe invisible in some senses, but we know that it's there. It exerts pressure. It exists. It's a certain temperature in there. And if there's temperature, we know there's something inside it with energy. Anything that's alive or exists has some kind of energy or heat or some light or some movement. If the vacuum of space has no movement, it has no temperature. They say it's 500 below zero, but that's really just a number they made up that says when all the heat is gone, when nothing exists, then we're going to call that 500 degrees below. Where nothing can move. It's like there's nothing moving because there's nothing there. Everything that is materially there, anything that is real, that constitutes something or some presence of something, means there has to be some temperature or some movement. It has to indicate that it is present by having some manifestation somewhere. So you can tell something's there by, you say, well, it's blue. If we can see it's blue, then something's there, even if it's just blue. If you touch it and it's rough or smooth, then we say, oh, it's there. How does it feel? Well, it's smooth. If it makes a sound, we can say, oh, well, there's a sound, therefore it must be there. We can hear it. Because everything that exists has something that you can tell to the human senses that it's there. Now, it may be that we can't see the color or the shape or the size or the texture or something like that, because it's beyond our perception, but it's still there, like wind or mind. But we could still demonstrate mind, and we have decided that mind is literally the source or the reality that is that which exists by virtue of itself. Mind. The Bible calls that deity, theos. Now, this is something that no Christian or anyone else seems to understand. But the gods never existed. That's an English word that came from some Germanic, Scandinavian word, some Lombardic Gothic word. It referred to one of their ancestors before them. There's a whole list. There's a book that gives all of these bloodlines from these Germanic tribes back to certain individuals 1,000 years prior to them, or 2,000 years. And you get back to Thor, and you get back to Godin. Some of the tribes called him Woden or Odin. But these Goths, specifically the Lombards, took over Italy about the time of the Holy Roman Empire. Is not Roman, but Gothic. The Holy Roman Empire was run by the Germans. It's strange that people think, when you're talking about world powers, that there was Egypt and Assyria and Babylon and Greece, and then they get to Rome, and they say, and then Rome ruled for 1,000 years or something. Rome didn't rule for 1,000 years. It may have ruled for 300 or 400, technically. But around the year 400 AD, Rome was taken over by the Goths, the Germanic tribes, Germany, the Swiss Alps and Upper Italy and the Alps area. And they took over all of Italy. And then their other brother tribes, the Germanic tribes, took over the rest of Europe. And so these Germanic peoples believed in Godin. And so it got written in our English, God, or God, and refers to some particular one of their ancestors. So what is this concept in our Bible, which in Hebrew we have El and Elohim, which is plural? Well, El is probably the father's name. We were talking about the other day Abel, which translates to Abi-El. Abi is father, and El, what is it? Well, let's for a moment say it's the name of this being called the Father. Okay, Abi is father, so it probably is my father is El. And who was Abel's father? It was Adam. We've also talked about the linguistic connection between Adam and David, divine, deity, Daoud, dad, dada. So father has all of those words attached to it in different languages, papa. But it has other words that describe him. So there's titles, there's names. One of the names of deity is, in the Sumerian, one of their deities is Enki, which is not the father of the deities, but it's one of the children, and he had a brother named Enlil. So our Heavenly Father has Satan and Jesus, and this is the same story. So, Iya Enki, in the Hebrew, it's Iya Anoki. And literally, it's very close to the Sumerian. They're both Semitic languages. And so in our Bible, it literally uses the expression Iya Inki, but it spells it Iya Anoki. But there's no vowel, so it could be Iya Inki. You could put whatever vowels you want in there. So scientists, or I should say scholars, have said that this word probably means I am. So the ego, or the personality, is really what that's getting at. The true universal I am. Jesus claimed to be that when he was on the earth, saying, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, not indicating that I am the only way, I am the only life, but when he says I, he refers to consciousness itself. The universe is one. Even in English, we call it universe, or, verse, kind of like logos or saying. Jesus is the logos. In the beginning was the word, and he was one with his Father. So I and the Father are one. All the beings are one thing. It's consciousness. And that's why the Bible says that the divine being, Theos, is in all, through all, and above all. That's why Jesus said, I and the Father are one, and ye are one with us as I am one with the Father. Because he's talking about the I, that which is the being, which is invisible and has nothing to do with the material. The material is the robe you put on, or the world, or the creation, or the home that you live in, the houses. So, because we don't know, and the Bible has never been translated from this original Hebrew or Greek or wherever language it was in to our language, we are missing almost all of the information. We see Abel and we do not know it means my father is El. And there are lots of things all the way through the Bible that if we knew, we would understand the Bible a lot better. Now, in order to know what Genesis 6:4 is talking about with the Nephilim, we've got to have more information. We find that the book of Genesis that we have is an excerpt from the ancient scriptures. The original scriptures were written down by Jesus that our ancient Western tradition says was Enoch. Sumerians call it Enki. There were 2 Enkis, but we don't want to get into that right now. But these ancient divine beings that these Sumerians and Egyptians are talking about, they are the beings in our Bible in the Old Testament called the patriarchs. And we've covered this and we've gone into it deep. Most of you are probably going to be people who've been watching me for a while, so I'm going to leave it that. If you want to know more about kind of what I'm saying there, you're going to have to watch more videos that I've been doing where I explain that particular point in a better, deeper way. But let's assume that a lot of you understand that the divine being is a spirit and that it's everywhere, and it's mind. And we all have this higher consciousness. That's why it says we were all one in Christ from the founding of the world. And just as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive. So all means everyone. And therefore, the son of destruction is the one that was the flesh, is that lower ego, that's the delusion. This is where the Old Testament I am, in some places, is not the I am love and truth, but it's the I am hate and vengeance. And this is where Jesus came to explain there is the devil, and then there is love. There is 2 systems, there's 2 covenants. And so Jesus said, your father, talking to the Sanhedrin who were following after the laws of Moses, he said, the deity that you're worshiping, the law that made the law of Moses, is the devil. He's a liar and a murderer. Now, most Christians think, well, Jesus must be crazy then. He's made that up. I don't believe in Jesus then, right? Or the Orthodox Jews who say, oh, that's paganism then. And so you've even got Christians now, like witnesses and that, they say, oh, that's paganism. They don't know that deity is everywhere and throughout, in all, above all, and they don't know about reincarnation. They've never been allowed to see and read all the other scriptures to know that this is all part of our ancient truth. So there's, like I said, okay, that's not really what I wanted to point out, but there's just so much, like a cloud of information that we don't know. Bits and pieces is all we know, like little glitter. And, well, we know little facts here and there. We might know some things. But we also have a lot of false information, like glitter, that's obscuring our way to know the truth. Now, I'm talking about that because I don't want to disparage the idea that we are not completely and wholly living in a whole bunch of lies. That everything that we were told is a lie. So, do I know what shape the earth is? No, there would be no way to know if the earth has a shape. But what we can do, not from what we could observe, walking down the road. Now, there have been some tests that have been done. Some guy in ancient, BC stuck a stick in the ground and there was a shadow, and he measured the shadow. And then he went several hundred miles away and put another stick in the ground and measured that shadow and found that there was a difference between the two shadows in the length. And he determined that it was because the earth was round. Well, you see, that's not foolproof. Because what if he was in a big crater? Then if he moved further away towards the top of the crater, he would get a different result, but not necessarily proven. Or maybe it's a convex. Maybe he was on a mountain. That wouldn't work, if you're doing this experiment on a hill. Maybe for 1,000 miles, there's a big protrusion on the earth, a mountain or something. So that would kind of, maybe a long mountain range, it would obscure the so it's not foolproof. You'd have to do that test in combination with other tests to determine whether it was consistent with other ways of proof. But you can look at the sun going up in the morning and goes down, comes up in the east, goes down in the west, and you can assume, well, if we're on a ball, it must be going around the backside of the earth. However, if we're on a disc, it could be going around like a corkscrew. That seems highly unlikely when you wonder, well, what would be the force that causes these things to go around and around like a corkscrew up above us? Well, there are possibilities, like vortices. They claim there's a sun in the middle and the planets going around it. Well, why? Because of mysterious forces and things that Newton discovered, like velocity, speed, acceleration. But even if we could prove all of those Newtonian scientific axioms, we cannot necessarily say that those are the reason that the moon is in the sky. There's just too many leaps of faith. As far as I know, at this time, I don't have an absolute way to prove if the earth is flat or round. But what I'm saying is that you can prove that it's not what they're saying. It could not be that the moon is 250,000 miles away when we can see the definition with our eyes. We can see the craters. Another oddity is that the craters on the moon that face us, that we see all the time, appear to be very much like if you were to get back and look at what they tell us the earth looks like from space. Other than the fact that they're claiming it looks blue like a marble, which we've proven can't be possible. The sun would reflect off the ocean. It would just be a white light. It wouldn't be a blue planet from space. They lied to us about that. And all the pictures we've seen are CGI. Anyway. But when we look at these globe pictures with the continents, we see North America and South America and Europe and Asia and Africa and Australia and Hawaii and all of this. It looks very similar to what we're seeing on the moon. It almost looks like there's continents, or perhaps those darker depressions, or they are depressions. Maybe they're not continents, but oceans. But we look at the moon, it is a circle. We could say then maybe the Earth is a circle. The sun's a circle, but we don't know if we ever see the backside of the sun. You know, the moon, we always see the backside of the moon. And a lot of people say, well, how could that possibly be? Well, if the moon's not rotating, and we say that because when we look at the moon, no matter when we look at the moon, it's always facing us. So it doesn't seem like it's spinning. However, the Earth and the moon, they tell us, are both going around the sun. So if we were to go around the sun, if the Earth was to go around the sun, and it took the Earth 365 days to go around the sun, then we would rotate, apparently, every 365 days if we didn't rotate at all. But that seems impossible. The Earth somehow has sun shining on one side and darkness on the other. But a few hours later, there's a sun on a different part of the Earth. So we would say, well, then it must be spinning. But here's the odd thing. If it is like they're saying, and we're going around the sun every 365 days, it's odd that we've gone in a rotation to where we've gone through all 4 seasons. Wouldn't the only way for that to be true is if the sun was going around the Earth? If the sun was going around the Earth, then the sun would shine on that part of the Earth that it was shining on, and it would move as it went around and shine on another side of the Earth. And if it took 365 days, then those 4 seasons would occur within that 365 days. But we've gone through the 4 seasons, and if one side of the Earth was always facing the sun, then it would just be hot on one side of the Earth, even though we've still gone through all the seasons. The backside of the Earth would always be dark. So we've got to have a rotation in there. If we're going to have the Earth going around the sun, we've got to have 2 rotations to make it work. 365 days for the seasons and 24 hours for day and night. Here's another problem. That seems to fit, right? The seasons, 365 days around the sun and rotating every 24 hours, that seems to fit. Except that while we're rotating and going around the sun, we look at the moon, and every time we come around and the moon comes up, we see the light on the moon refracting off a different part of the moon. So the moon has got to be moving in relation to the Earth in order for us to constantly see different sides. Now, it could be due to the rotation, because when we rotate every 24 hours, then during the night, some days, we might be looking at the moon from a different angle, because we're rotating every 24 hours. And but you see, what would be causing the moon to come up every 30 days? Where's the 30 days coming in? Well, scientists have said that the moon follows the Earth. One side of the moon always faces the Earth. But the movement of the moon is the waxing and the waning. In other words, it must be wobbling behind the Earth. So you've got the sun in the middle, the Earth going around, and the moon going around with the Earth, but not always exactly perpendicular. It goes back and forth like a dog wagging his tail. So it waxes and wanes and waxes and wanes. In that case, the cause of the shadow on the moon would have to be the Earth getting in the way as it waxed and waned, as the dog's tail wagged from the left to the right. Then we would see half of the month, the moon being light on one side, and the other half, the moon being light on the other side. Well, that's what we see. So that's how they've determined that the Earth goes around 365 days around the sun, and the moon wags like a dog's tail, waxes and wanes, and the Earth rotates. Okay, it all fits. Except we're always seeing the same side of the moon. So when this moon is waxing and waning, or like a dog's tail going from left to right, it has to be locked in. The one side has got to be locked in towards the exact angle. You see the exact same angle of the moon. It never changes. If we're waxing and waning, you should be able to see behind the moon a little bit. We wouldn't always see the same side. If the moon's not rotating, we wouldn't always see the same side. It's going back and forth. We'd see a little around that corner, and then when it went back the other way, the other 30 days, or 15 days on this side, we'd see around the other side of the moon a little bit. As it waxed the other way, we'd see the behind the moon on that side. So it's the light glow on the moon that's going back and forth, not the moon itself. You see, it would seem almost impossible for the moon to always face the Earth in exactly the same way and yet be going back and forth like a dog wagging his tail. Because that would require two motions, like a rocking horse. And rocking horses have that motion because they're on a spring that can go forward and backward, and the horse is connected to the spring. So as the horse goes back, the belly of the horse is always perpendicular with the spring because it's connected to the spring. So we know why that phenomena exists with a rocking horse, or with a horse that, on a kid's playground where they got these little horses on the little springs. The belly of the horse always faces the spring. So if you're at the end of the spring and you're looking up, you're always going to see the exact same belly because it's connected. So we understand the physics of that. But is the moon somehow connected to the Earth so that the face of the moon cannot move in any way, left, right, up, or down? It's got to be exactly the same angle facing the Earth. Even though we're spinning, but as we go around in the nighttime and the moon comes up, we've got to be seeing the same side of the moon always. Well, there is a way that we could be connected to the moon in some way, like that rocking horse. And that would be if you're talking about centrifugal force. If the Earth was spinning because of some vortex, you've seen hurricanes, and the reason they spin is because there's a low pressure and a high pressure, negative and positive. This is why atoms spin. This is why planets spin. This is why they believe this. They can't go out there and look at it and demonstrate it. It's too big to demonstrate. They can't see it with their eyes. But they can imagine. Well, we can't see atoms and photons either. But again, we're imagining this must be the case, that there's a positive and a negative pole, and there's a rotation due to vortices. This is the only explanation for the movement of planets and stars flying all over the place. That the universe has variables, that whatever the whole of the universe is, it separates into various parts. And each part has its place and gravitates to that place. And if they get out of kilter, or if they get to flying, they will be influenced by other particles nearby, like static electricity will bring them in, or just the motions of these things themselves that maybe create heat. When they come into contact with something that's slower, that's cold, then there is some kind of relationship between this cold object and the hot object where they start to spin in opposite directions from each other. And the heat that's on the one object is being transferred to the cold on the bottom object. And you create this torus field. So this is how we've come to understand it. But the greatest minds have thought about these things and decided that this is the only logical explanation for why anything moves or spins or flies. And when you open the barn door and the light starts shining into the darkness of the barn, and because it's warm air, because it's sunshine, it's heating up the area as it goes into the barn. It's cool and cold in the barn. And that heat that goes in there starts some kind of motion, and you see all the dust and the sort of a wind. This is where wind comes from. Why is it when you go outside, all of a sudden there's windy? Look up, you'll see a big cloud going by, and that cloud is much colder than the earth. And so it creates this vortex, and this wind starts moving. Wherever that cloud goes over a certain area, then below that cloud, there's a bunch of wind. And we've seen how clouds move in circular fashion, like vortices, hurricanes, tornadoes. What causes the tornado? Just like the same thing that causes a little whirlwind in the atom or the solar system. This is how they've imagined it, although they cannot tell. They cannot see it with their physical eyes, but they have hypothesized and theorized that this is what is causing it, because we can demonstrate on Earth with the cause of heat and cold when they come together. We can see it being applied to the sky and with the weather, and therefore we assume that it can also be applied in much larger scales, and perhaps there are objects like planets flinging around a larger thing like the sun, which would then be the positive or the heat, and the moon would be the bottom side, which would be a cold, gray, colder light. And between the sun and the moon, there would be this vortex. And perhaps there would be other things like the earth flying around or something. So in that case, one might ask, perhaps the sun's not moving, the moon's not moving, but the moon and the sun, being different temperatures, look like the same size, right? But one's hot and one's in the cold, one's the negative, one's the positive. And that's creating this vortex. And whatever's in between the sun and the moon, which is perhaps all the 7 planets, they are flying around in graduating stages between the two. And why would that be? Well, because perhaps some of the elements that belong to the whole, the variables, all the way from the positive to the negative, they're variations in variables. Layers, gradations. So we have planets that are, maybe one's made out of hard metal like Uranus, uranium, plutonium, Pluto, or maybe they're more mercurial, liquid, like mercury, right? Or gaseous or something, or different, made out of different elements. So they have the elemental chart with 100 and some odd elements. From the lighter substance, whatever is something material and definable, is going to be part, not all of the whole. We're going to define part of the whole. And so each part of the whole, in order to be something different, is a variable. And so we have lighter to harder, negative to positive, heat to cold. These are just words to describe all these variables. And therefore, we could describe these variables as 7 graduating stages, each of them being one of these planets, from the sun to the moon. And in between, sandwiched in between, is the 5. The sun and the moon, mommy and daddy, and then the 5 children in between, which are graduating. And so those in between are being influenced by the hot and the cold to rotate like a vortex. And therefore, when we're on the Earth, which would probably be the center, right? This is why we call it the planet, because it's the plane that our consciousness is on. We have feet, but our consciousness isn't seated there. That's a lower part of us. And there may be something to that part of us that's like, that houses lower instinctual qualities. But where we think from is usually considered in the brain or in the top. And it's supposed to be the highest, like the positive. But then you got the negative, which is what? The material. The negative, which is the weightier things, the heavier, the mama, the matter, mother. So between the spirit and the matter, right, E equals mc squared, because energy can be transformed into matter and matter into energy, because it's the one whole that's always the one whole, but between the two extreme sides is all that is between the graduating layers. And because they're separate variables, they're going to react with each other. They're trying to become one again or expand. They do this in some kind of cycle where we're dissecting the whole into these variables like the elemental chart, or like, say, a solar system. Perhaps all these stars are connected to our solar system as also graduating points. Maybe there are millions of different possibilities within this one whole, but at the top of the whole is the sun, and at the bottom is the moon. You see, we can't go out there and look, but we can understand that this concept of atoms going around and around, and planets going around and around, was something that they knew and understood and talked about centuries and thousands of years ago in the Holy Scriptures. So this is legit. But what we don't know is the exact way that it's done. What the Bible doesn't say is that outside of our bubble of atmosphere and reality, there's a vacuum of eternal space where there's nothing. Because you couldn't measure that nothing. It's not there. It's only a concept nothing. And beyond this nothing, out there in the middle of nowhere, is something that we can see and communicate with beyond nothing, beyond eternity, far enough away from our reality to be a separate reality. And between our two realities, there is no ether, there is no substance to communicate. You see, sound has to vibrate to communicate with you. When I make a sound, it vibrates through the air and gets to your ear. Everything vibrates and goes through, and it's the principle of the universe, that everything's one whole and we're all reacting. So whatever the universe is, it's one whole, and it has to be connected somehow with every other part of the universe, and it's connected in some disciplined, exact gradient that it must follow by law. Therefore, the heavier has to be on the bottom and the lighter has to be on the top. Therefore, the sun is going to be shining bright and hot, and the moon is going to be colder. And this is going to cause the rotations. So this means that the stars, whatever they are, have got to be somehow influenceable by this great heat we call the sun and this great cold we call the moon. Unless, of course, we're wrong and it's not the moon. But you'd think that's the cold part, that maybe there's something else really cold, like a big chunk of ice somewhere even further out, that's even colder than the moon or something. Well, okay, but we're still dealing with the same principle. But the thing of it is that when we see the moon and the sun, they're the exact same size. And one rules the night and one rules the day. We have to kind of assume, it would make sense, that we're the earth and we're in between. And night's on one side and day's on the other. And if you look out towards the day, you see the sun. But in the nighttime, we look out from the opposite side of the earth and we're seeing the moon. And they're the same size, so it looks like two bookends on a shelf. And you say, well, why are the stars all so small? Well, because they're not the same as the sun and the moon. And probably the sun and the moon are not the same as the earth. Therefore, we can't assume that the earth is round, nor can we assume that all the stars are like suns and have planets. This is their assumption. But I am saying that there is a lot of ancient history with scientists going back to Plato and Aristotle and Pythagoras that indicates, and scriptural evidence, that we are in a world based on these principles. Negative and positive, and vortices and spinning and balls and things like this. So it is entirely possible that the earth is round, but it's also entirely possible it is not. My whole point about this, that I've been trying to get across here, is that it would be impossible for any one person to sit down and figure out all of this science on their own. We have to go by something. I go by the scripture. Why? Because I believe that is the science. That is the true science. And is it just my belief? See, I don't think we can just have beliefs. Oh, I believe, well, you believe. Well, no, who cares about what you believe, but what is accurate knowledge? Sometimes we have to admit that we don't have the expertise in this and we don't understand. Obviously, there are forces in this world that we don't understand. The wind and why the sun comes up and why light and heat, does what it does. And, something's making things fall from the sky and land on your head and go, ow. Is it gravity? Okay, so we don't understand all of this, but we go to science class and we learn a lot of this stuff that they're talking about. The problem is that science today doesn't know where they got this information. They got it from Plato and Pythagoras. Who did Pythagoras and Plato and Aristotle, where did they get it? They got it from the priesthood. A lot of you Christians don't like that. Oh, only the Jewish priesthood we like. No, the Jewish priesthood is an appendage to the Melchizedek priesthood, which is all over the world. Enoch was a Melchizedek high priesthood. His lineage goes before the flood and comes down after the flood, all the way down. And around the time of Moses, Jethro was a Melchizedek priest, and so was Moses. But the people rejected all these ancient truths and they wanted vengeance. They fell. They were angry and mean and hurtful, and they had to be laws to govern animals because they weren't imbued with, from on high, with this spirit. Modern man doesn't know what that word means, but it's our word mind. Mind's invisible, powerful, in all, through all. The universe is the manifestation of a mind. It has a personality. It is by virtue of itself. And it manifests or creates through the word, just as the scriptures tell us. Let it be, and it was. By faith, the universe was framed, Hebrews says. So this is why, because the universe is deity, and deity means theos, which is higher consciousness. That's what those ancient words meant. All this pantheon, they were not people. These pantheons of things today we call gods. There's the father, there's the mother, there's all the children, there's always been this pantheon of these characters. The Divine Comedy. But if you look at what these divine beings are, they are things like power and love and justice and goodness and strength. All of those are attributes of mind. So when the universe was one, it was the pleroma, which is the fullness of all the divine pleroma that dwelleth in Christ, or the Son of Man, which is humans. We are the image for that spirit to dwell in. And so the fullness of those deities, the pleroma, the 72 divine beings that represent different aspects of this one mind that pervades the universe, is manifesting infinitely around itself, creating and making the universe as it is. But scientists today have their theories and their postulates, but the reason they're wrong is because, just like with everything else in this world, if it's based on greed and who can have power over you, they will manipulate the facts. So we don't want to go by politicians who are manipulating. They don't know. They're manipulating us to stay in power. We don't want to go by these scientists that are billionaires. That's who's running NASA, SpaceX, and Bezos and Elon are fighting for this power over the air. Not only would it stand to reason that they'd be lying to us to keep us in control, but what they're teaching is contrary to what the ancient scriptures taught, which is the ancient science, which was given to us by Enoch, which is Jesus, thank you very much, which is written in the book of Enoch, the Hebrew version, the book of Thoth, the Egyptian version, right? And all of the world had these ancient truths. They all had these temples. They all had these priests that were astrologers and scientists that were taught things from someone who knew these things. Because Enoch was literally taken somewhere, given this information by inspiration, and it was written for all mankind. It was purposeful. There's a plan here. They wrote it in the pyramid. They put it in the stars. And that's what the Bible teaches. You Christians, if you don't understand the Bible as being what is supposed to be written actually in the stars and in the pyramid, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 19, verse 19, it tells us that the Great Pyramid in the midst of the land of Egypt and at the border, because there was northern and southern Egypt, and so the border between northern and southern Egypt is the midst and the border. And that is the exact place there at Cairo where the Great Pyramid was built. And it is a monument unto the Lord. Well, it was always called the Pillar of Enoch. So that is the true science. The hieroglyphs. Hiero meaning holy and glyph meaning writing. So the holy writing is all the scripture, which was initially and first put down by Enoch in the Great Pyramid. And then, therefore, it was written in the stars. They made the stars like a book with pictures that described the story written in the pyramid, which was then written by other priests and other priesthoods on other parchments and other materials down through different nations. And in the final days, when the one that the prophecy spoke of came, Jesus, and his disciples were chosen, he told them to write down once and for all what is the mystery that was revealed once and for all unto the holy apostles and prophets. And it was not known. It was a mystery. It was written in stone. But they did understand a lot of different things that we don't today. They certainly understood that they were here in a classroom, that the universe wasn't, by virtue of itself, the physical universe, eternal. It was just a manifestation of mind. We were in a closed system. There wasn't any vacuum or nothingness. It was all whatever you perceived as that's what was. And the universe is the garment that we put around our intelligent beings. And so the things that science is teaching today, they got from Plato and Pythagoras, who got it from the Egyptian priesthood. And so we got to go back to the Egyptian priesthood. That's even prior to the Bible itself, because Moses wrote the Old Testament, but Moses was 1300 BC. The flood happened a long time before that. And before the flood, there was a man named Enoch, and he's the one who originally wrote it. And the lineal descent down from Enoch through Noah and down through his children, one in the line of the Levitical priests, which was an appendage of the great priesthood. And it was only like a veil because the people wouldn't receive the light or the truth. So it was all written down in symbols, and now we're all completely confused. And then these greedy people burned the books and hid all this information from us, and now they've lost it. So we've got to go back to the ancient scriptures, and I guarantee, I tell you, friends, that these principles that they have used to determine what the physics of the universe is, they've lost that connection. They don't know where the source of the information is now. And now they're just going on these little experiments that they're doing, that like the pharmaceutical company will do an experiment and try to prove something that isn't true, to get us all partaking of something that will hurt us and kill us, or telling us that we're in a little planet that is nothing. The universe is infinite. There's no deity. There's no eternal life. There's no divine being, but there is a divine material chaos spinning endlessly in a vacuum. You know, we're misunderstanding these original principles. The reason they came up with the atom spinning and all these things spinning and the solar system, they were models based on the ancient wisdom. And that wisdom hasn't changed. And so we can assume that the great prophets have come down to us. I mean, if you look at the book of Isaiah, or I should say the book of Ezekiel, where it talks about the cherubim and the wheels within wheels and all of this, and in the middle of this whole thing was a man. We've done videos on this. This is literally describing, picturesque, almost poetically, certainly parabolically, the exact same information that the Hindu books speak of, with Buddha sitting in the lotus position, and around him is these chakras or energy points, just like our universe is doing. And the whole thing is Adam Kadmon, the heavenly man. One being from the head to the toes, sitting with rings within rings, energy points and candles that must be lit by that inner higher consciousness, which is Christ consciousness, that comes into this temple. So we didn't prove anything, but what I wanted to say today is simply this, just this. Understand that there is things that we can understand, and there are things that we don't know and we'll probably never know until we get more information. We have to, as Christians, stop going around saying, I believe this and I believe that, and I'm going to believe this, and I like this idea, and I'm going to stick with it. And, you know, you've got to understand what you're talking about before you talk about it. And if you haven't understood the book of Enoch and the ancient wisdom and the Egyptian hieroglyphs and the Great Pyramid and all of these things, and if you haven't spent a lot of time in prayer and fasting, you're not going to know a lot of this information, and you're not going to be able to put all this together. But the idea that you can see an airplane and see that there's something coming out of the tailpipe and immediately say, yep, see, they're purposefully spraying the air, and call that science? No, because you haven't proved it. You've seen cars, they have exhaust, airplanes have exhaust. That doesn't necessarily mean they're intentionally spewing poisons or chemicals. Yes, they've admitted there are planes that do that. They're changing the weather and they're doing things, and they may be poisoning us. Why wouldn't they be? Of course they probably are. But don't say, we know that the airplanes that go every day across the air, spewing out exhaust, that in itself, that you know that is a chemtrail, not a comtrail. It's just not right to say that because you thought you remembered the lamb laid down with the lion, but it really said the lamb laid down with the wolf, then there must be a Mandela effect. That's not true. I've got books back in the 60s and 50s that's got that verse still intact. It's always been. I've known my Bible since I was a boy. And I've always known, and I still remember what it says. The lamb shall lie down with the wolf, and the lion shall eat straw like the bull. There's never been a time when it said the lamb laid down with the lion. It never said that. We saw paintings with a lion and a leopard, and then maybe in the distance a goat or something over here. But that's just a painting. That's a rendering of the entire verse that talks about goats, snakes, lambs, wolves. But it doesn't in a painting, because they accentuate a lion and a lamb, doesn't mean that that's what the Bible always said. There definitely were paintings with lions and lambs predominantly in the foreground. But understand what proof is. No, the world's not disintegrating and they're taking our memories from us. They're not going to do that. They're not allowed to do that. No one can take your memories from you. You are a child of the living deity. And yes, they're trying to kill us. And yes, they're lying to us. We've just said that. We can prove some places where they're lying to us. Let's rely upon the scriptures, the Holy Scriptures. They have not changed them. They're written in stone, chiseled into stone and in ancient parchments, in vases, in caves that we just dug up. Yeah, there could be some manipulation, but all the scriptures teach the exact same thing. Reincarnation and the plan of salvation that we're trying to get our white robe and crown. So I'm making this video just to say we cannot prove if the earth is flat or if it is round easily without definitive information. You and I independently probably couldn't prove it. Maybe through some kind of logic we could come to a better understanding or rule out one thing or another, as we're doing here. I'm trying with logic to get to some point where we can say we know this and yep, we know that, and we can put these things together. But I see so many Christians, so many people out there running around with all these different favorite conspiracy theories that they love. And they're making all these thousands of videos. It's bringing reproach upon the truth. When half of you Christians believe that Jesus wasn't real, some of you believe he's not coming ever again. I believe we're in the middle season. Well, it doesn't matter what you believe. You must understand there's actual facts, and the scriptures can be put together clearly and easily when you fully understand the scriptures. The little season is the Great Tribulation. So yes, you were right. But the thing of it is, that's always been the case, and we just didn't understand it. Peter talked about the 1,000 years and said it's a time before Christ returns, where he's being patient with us. And Jesus told us that his kingdom for 1,000 years, before it's permanent, is going to be temporary, where he gives us we're stewards and we're working. He's going to reign through us if we're willing to be a good steward. But Jesus said, will he find faith when he arrives on earth? That's the question. Will any of us be good stewards and be faithful and love our brother? Because where there is love, there is the kingdom of Christ, and it's on the earth. The little season is at the end of the 1,000 years, which we're about to get to now, where the resurrection occurs and the eternal kingdom that Revelation 5:10 talks about, where we will reign upon the earth for 1,000 years. No, forever. The 1,000 years is a temporary reign of Christ through us, because we receive talents as stewards and we are taking care of the domestics of the kingdom for Christ. He's working through us. But there is coming a time whenever I will see him, he will return. That's going to be at the little season, right after the Great Tribulation, after the 1,000 years is over and all the stewards have done whatever they can and whatever they're going to do, and then we'll all have the great judgment, which the great battle of Armageddon says right there in Revelation 22 is at the end of the 1,000 years. And that is the great judgment and also a great battle. And that's where Gog of Magog comes up out of the bottomless pit, and the dragon is released from the pit, which is what Revelation 13 is talking about, with the beast coming out of the bottomless pit and that last little Armageddon, the last war and the great tribulation. So Yes, we're in the little season. The Bible tells you that. The Bible also says that we're going to go through 1,000 years where he's being patient with us, and we're all stewards, and we're doing our best, and then will come the judgment at the end of the 1,000 years, which is when Gog of Magog comes up and surrounds the saints, and when the beast comes out of the bottomless pit, and there's this judgment, and we're all judged according to our deeds, and the battle of Armageddon comes, and Christ returns to set up his eternal kingdom, which Revelation 5:10 says is forever, not for 1,000 years. So we've gone through the 1,000 years. We're about to see Christ coming on the clouds of heaven for his eternal kingdom, where Isaiah 35 in chapter 11 says, the desert will blossom as the rose, the lamb will lie down with the wolf, and the lion will straw like the bull. And this is the restoration of paradise forever. So I know I just gave you some thoughts there, and you might say, well, those are all your opinions, Dave. Yes, but I am articulating these opinions and showing you verse by verse why. Maybe I didn't get it all out in this video. You may not have been convinced, but keep watching. We're going to give you the information. I've been praying, and the Lord has been showing me this, and I've read the Bible enough to where I can put this together, and it's opening up into something that is beautiful. I'm beginning to understand this. But if I had started believing something that just from some whim, because I thought they were lying, so I just made up my own theory, and I didn't have any way to know if it was true or not, just making it up, because I believed it, and I went around spreading it like, oh, Christ isn't ever coming back again, it's all spiritual. That's not the true interpretation. And we can verify it. And until you get it verified, whether I'm explaining it in one of my videos and you get it and you begin to understand it, or whether you're studying it and praying, fasting and asking the Lord for help and studying your Bible and you get it. But when you get it, you'll have it clear. You'll understand. There'll be no ambiguity. No theories. We cannot base our reality on speculation and theories. And if we don't know, we don't know. And if there's any way to know anything other than observation, it's probably through the scriptures, which is something that science is completely and wholly not focused on. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Try to get this uploaded. My video is going to be monetized, I guess, now. And so I'm going to try and get this uploaded here in a minute. Hope you guys have a wonderful evening. The Lord will bless you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.